Okay, Teresa, I understand that you have some Valentine's Day questions for us today.
Oh, yes, I
Is
do.
that right?
Yeah, it's about
Thank you.
relationships. Yes, thank you.
All right, let's hear them.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a more of a Freudian question. I wanted to know what are the most sexual houses, signs, planets, and nakshatras, and also what factors contribute to this sense and this need for sexuality or the sexual nature of these.
All right, let's start with the what are the sex houses? Those are all found in Amsterdam. Now, the sex houses in a chart are definitely 8, right? 8 is definitely the house of sex because 8 is called Ayush. Ayush means the life force. This is where the life force comes from. It comes from the 8th house. So it literally is, where does life force come from? It comes from the genitals. That's how you, that's how you recreate, procreate. And that's what sex is. It's the reproductive drive. It's the drive to create. And people don't maybe understand what's going on with their own sex drive, but it's actually the drive to create something or some situation which is worth living for. That's what the sex drive is. And that's what the 8th house is the desire to create, to manifest some kind of beauty, something that's worth experiencing. So definitely the 8th house being the first of all, representing the genitals physically. Second of all, it's private, it's secretive, you can't see it very well. Third of all, it's the source of life and reproduction. So this is definitely, and fourth of all, it's very charismatic, right? It knows how to make people dance. So the 8th house is really the number one spot for any sex question in astrology. Then you got to also think about, I think the runners up for the second place position are 5 and 12.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yes.
And I'm not really sure which one to put in second place. Why don't we put 12th house in second place? For sex, like actual sex. Because the 12th house signifies the release from the physical world and also the expulsion of energy. So a sexual orgasm is actually like an explosion. So there's like a release of energy. But what's really interesting to me about the fact that the 8th and the 12th house are so sexual is that they're both very non-physical and spiritual houses, 8 and 12. And because most of the time we think about sex as a physical act, but really what this is telling us is the 8th and the 12th house is that the essence of it is not a physical act. What's going on with it is there's definitely physical trigger. There's physical triggers, but what you actually experience isn't a physical thing. It's actually a destruction of the physicality, which happens in the orgasm itself. You actually disengage. You disengage with your limited physical existence. And you also disengage entirely from past and future. You just disengage. So it's a moksha. Sexuality actually is a liberation. Not just sexuality, but orgasm is a liberation. But it's not a self-sustaining, independent liberation. It's dependent upon physical triggers. So it's not always easy to get. Like if you really want that feeling, that what you get in orgasm, it would be better to get liberation, enlightenment, moksha in a spiritual sense, because then it's self-sustaining and not dependent upon something external. But that's why sex is so compelling, because it's this powerful release of, it's a release of all the limitations that are blocking the inherent joy of consciousness. You get disengaged from all the blockages. You get disengaged from your physical reality. You get this, and that's why you can't really have an orgasm. I mean, for women, it's much different than men. But even if men are sensitive, there's also like different extents of orgasm. You can't really, it's also true for men that there's like good orgasm and not good orgasm. Like you can't really have a good orgasm unless you actually really disengage from the physical reality that you're in. If you're thinking about something and you can't get your mind off something, if you're a woman, you won't even be able to have an orgasm. So yeah, you have to really disengage. And what happens by disengaging with all of those things is all of the blockades and the limitations upon our consciousness are become forgotten. And then the nature of the consciousness shines through, which is full of bliss. There's another illusion about sex is that people think it happens in their penis or it happens in their clitoris or it doesn't. It happens in your consciousness. Everything happens in your consciousness, right? All that sex is showing you is how much potential joy there is in life. If you could just get rid of all the limitations and the anxiety that puts your mind in the future and the past and makes you concerned with this or that unnecessary thing. If you could get rid of all that stuff, this is what you would be feeling all the time. You would be feeling the nature of an orgasm all the time. That's called Brahmananda. And so that's why it's very interesting to me why it's the 8th house and the 12th house are sexual. The 12th house, they call it the bed pleasure. English translations of Sanskrit terms. Bed pleasures, that means orgasm. So 8th house is more like, here's your drive, your creative, reproductive drive. This is the 8th house, sex drive. But the 12th house is actually that moment where it bears fruit. And then the 5th house, I said, was a runner-up too, right?
Yes.
Because 5th house is also about very much about creative drive. It's like the output from the 4th house. The 5th house is the output of the 4th house, moving towards the 7th, moving towards other people. But this 5th house is more towards the, you studied this with me. You know the difference between Kali, Sambhog Ichmayi, and Tadbhava Ichatmika. This is the technical Sanskrit details for the two different approaches to sexual love. One of them was the Sambhog Ichmayi, where the person just is really interested in sex. And the other one is Tadbhava Madhurya Ichatmika, where their interest is primarily not in sex, but the sex is just the anchor point for the experience of all the romance and the beautiful culture and courtship that goes around sex, right? That Tadbhava thing, the interest in the culture of sex, is a 5th house topic. Whereas 8 and 12 is more like, here's the sex act itself, here's the sambhog, here's the actual union. Where 12th is literally like, here's the moment of union. 8th house is like, here's that charismatic stuff, but it's actually happening. The sexual act has commenced in the 8th house. And the 5th house is the flirtation, the attraction, the love, the affection, the desire.
So if we, let's say, for example, take the sex culture of today, let's say that we see on Instagram, we see on social media, that flirtatious aspect of it, would that be the 5th house element or more of the 12th house?
Not the 12th.
Not the 12th.
It's a combination of 5 and 8.
5 and 8.
Yeah. 5 by itself doesn't get too overtly sexual. 5 by itself gets playful, loving, romantic, but it doesn't really get too much down to what you see in today's sex culture. What you see in today's sex culture is pretty blunt, from my point of view at least. It's pretty blunt. It's actually pretty direct to the point. So it's kind of not that attractive, actually. Today's sex culture is not that attractive. It's too blunt, too in your face. So it's more like it's already at the 8th house almost. It's not that much intelligence involved in it. There's not that much art involved in it. Of course, there's a little bit. There's always art and intelligence involved in enjoyment.
It wouldn't be 12th because there isn't much left for imagination, for example.
12th, there's nothing there. The 12th is like, this is the orgasm.
Okay.
Yeah, 12th is like, there's nothing physical happening there in the 12th house.
Those cover the houses. What about the signs? Could we assign?
Okay. Yeah, signs are similar, but not identical. Don't just say, well, 5th, 8th, and 12th houses, so therefore Leo, Scorpio, and Pisces are really sexy. But you'll be on the money with Scorpio. Scorpio, I would say, gets the prize. Everybody who's got a Scorpio, whatever, is going to be so happy because they're going to feel so sexy now. But Scorpio gets a prize.
Okay.
Definitely as a super sexy sign. Everybody knows that, though this is not news, right? The reason, though, is interesting. The reason is because it's a female sign, and a very female sign is a water sign. The water signs are very female, more so than the earth signs. It's a very female sign, but it's owned by a very male planet, Mars. And that's the reason why it's very sexy. Because you have united the male and the female principle in Scorpio. And that's what sex is, the uniting of the male and female principle. So therefore, actually Libra is also quite a sexy sign. Sex-oriented sign. For the opposite reason, you have a male sign owned by a very female planet. It's not as much as Scorpio because Libra is mildly male. It's not a fire sign. The strongly male signs are the fire signs. The mildly male signs are the air signs. But still, it's a runner-up to Scorpio. Libra has a different attitude than Scorpio also because of the air. Libra's a little bit more into the dance of the whole thing and a little bit flirty and lighthearted about it because of the air element, where Scorpio is really kind of dangerous about it, racy and adventurous.
And it's got that passionate. Okay. And as far as the planets go.
So now you can see the same thing too, right? It must, if the reason why Scorpio and Libra are sexy, that's not to say that other planets, this is another thing that I should say from the beginning, is that sex basically is life, because sex is the creation of life. So practically everything is going to have something to do with sex. I mean, even Saturn has an impact on sex. So it has something to do with sex, right? But here we're trying to point to the things that are really, really predominantly sexual. So that we're singling out 5th house, 8th house, 12th house, Libra, Scorpio. But of course, Taurus is beautiful. So that has something to do with sex. Gemini is interchange between people, intercourse between people. So that's very sexual. Even in Sanskrit, it's called mituna, which is a word that means sexual intercourse. It just literally means intercourse, though. It's a very interactive sign. So of course, every sign has something to do with sex. Every house has something to do with sex, but let's just point out the superstars. So for planets too, if Scorpio is so sexy because it's a combination of Mars and the female principle, and if Libra is sexy because it's a combination of Venus and a male principle, what you want to look for in planets is sexiness comes from combining Mars and Venus. Yeah, but it doesn't always mean good sexiness. But in a chart, it doesn't always mean that it's good sexiness. But it means sexiness. It brings the sexiness symbol up. Maybe it's maligned, then it's a difficult sexiness. But the planets on their own, I think it's interesting to bring this point out that Venus is not the sexy planet. Well, okay, Venus is the sexy planet, meaning the observed. Venus is the observed, Mars is the observer. Like I just made a post, kind of a funny tongue-in-cheek post on Facebook. All the world's indeed a stage, and men are in the audience. Happy Valentine's Day. So that's the female is the observed, and the male is the observer. That's the basic nature of the two energies. I'm not saying that no female observes, But I'm saying that the nature of the feminine energy is to be seen, and the nature of the male energy is to see. So Venus is sexy, but not sexual. You know what I mean? Venus is not the one who's really, and look at men and women. Women are beautiful, women are sexy, but men are the ones who are hungrier for sex, instigate sex, they have more drive, they have more sex drive. I know there's a woman somewhere who's going to say, no, I have more sex drive than a man. But I'm just talking about the general principle of masculinity and femininity. And I know that there's definitely a woman somewhere who has more Mars in her chart than a male does. So fine. But so Mars then is really actually has a lot to do with sex, which is ironic because he has no sensitivity. Mars has no niceness to him, but he has lust. So Mars represents lust. Venus represents beauty. If you put the two of them together, it's racy. It's like Scorpio. It's sexy.
What would happen if we put Venus and Scorpio in the 8th house?
Yeah.
That would work, right?
Yeah.
Or Mars in Libra in the 8th house?
Yeah. Mars in Libra in the 8th house, Mars and Libra in the 8th house is nice, but it wouldn't be typical. You won't get the typical insensitive man. Mars and Libra in the 8th house, you'll get a very sensitive sexual male. Because what's going on with Mars in Libra is the masculinity of Mars has no chance to operate in the environment of Libra. Or it has less chance to operate in the Venusian environment of Libra. So it tones down the masculinity, but then put it in the 8th house and it applies it to sexuality.
Okay.
So it's a good one. It would probably actually be very attractive, a very attractive male, sexually attractive male. Mars in Libra in the 7th house, and the 8th house. Venus in the 8th house is great for these kind of things too. It's a sensitivity. It brings this. It's again like combining the actual sexual drive, which is more like a Mars. 8th house is more like a Mars. It's the actual sex drive, and then it's putting it with Venus, which is the beauty and the sensitivity and the sexual object. So it's a good combination. Venus in the 8th house. Nakshatras?
Yes, nakshatras. And when I was thinking about this, because there's an element of creation to sex. So
Yeah.
I wanted to actually ask you also, when we talked about orgasm, how much is that associated to Brahma? Because
Brahma?
Brahma, yeah, because
Yeah.
he was associated to some of the nakshatras.
Yeah, he's associated to Rohini.
Oh, Rohini, that's right.
Yeah, he belongs to Rohini. He's in Rohini. Good point. And he's called Prajapati. Prajapati means the procreator. But he's not a sexual procreator, though. This is strange about Brahma. And then let's talk about that in 1 second. I want to postpone that for 1 second. And I also want to just mention the moon. The moon as a sexual thing, as a sexual planet is interesting. It's not that the moon is a sexual planet in itself, like Venus. But Venus certainly has a lot to do with sexuality, even though doesn't have the sex drive in it. It's the sex object. It's the beauty. It's the objective of the sexuality. So, I mean, the moon is not the sex drive or anything like that, but the moon is the mind, so it houses all our desires. So the moon is the place that houses the desires. So things affecting the moon are important also. Or the moon, like a moon in Scorpio, it gets kind of overpowered by lusts. That's what they think. People think of the moon in Scorpio. I think of the moon in Scorpio as debilitated. So it's kind of like, well, it gets overpowered even by the lust. So the moon is also sensitive to the planet to consider in sexuality. And then also you have other things to bear too. Another thing that you can use for assessing sexuality is the gender of planets in general, and see how those are combining. If you have a lot of male-female planets combining, male planets are Mars, most male, Sun next. Female planets are Venus, most female, and Moon next. Jupiter is also a male mildly, and Rahu is also a female wildly. And then the other planets are neuter or neutral or bigender, transgender. So you can also see those planets coming into play in people that don't have heterosexual outlooks or who have somewhere on the spectrum between heterosexual and homosexual. Nakshatras?
Yes.
Nakshatras. Nakshatras are really interesting, and also Vedic culture is so interesting because Vedic culture is so different than Mughal and Victorian influenced Indian culture. Vedic culture is really cool. And you would be surprised at the concepts of sexuality and everything that really are in Vedic culture. So Vedic nakshatras, they have a lot of sexual information in them. Like you mentioned about Rohini, just a lot of the nakshatras are named red woman. Rohini means red woman. Palguni means red woman. The red woman means she's ready to procreate. It either means she's blushing or it means she's old enough that she's menstruating, she's ready to go. So they call these nakshatras red women. There's the sexy ones. Rohini can be thought of as sexy also because it's, like you said, it's got Brahma. But Brahma there is not called Brahma. Brahma is addressed as Brahma in Abhijit nakshatra, which is not a very sexual nakshatra. But in Rohini is addressed as Ka. Ka is the first consonant. It's the sound that you make down here at the bottom of your throat with just a regular open mouth. So it's the first consonant. Excuse me. So the consonants are creative and they give shape to the vowels. Vishnu is A and Brahma is Ka. A is the basis of all the sounds, but Ka is the first specific shape on a sound. So Ka means the creator, the one who's actually creating shapes and details. So in Rohini, you get Brahma as the creator. It's a more passionate version of Brahma. And sometimes it's referred to as Prajapati, the procreator. In Rohini. But more abstractly with the nakshatras, they're in groups, which are so useful. So they're in groups like Mridu and Tikshna, Dhruva, like those kind of nakshatras. So the nakshatras that are called Mridu would be feminine. Mridu means sweet, feminine, subordinate, cooperative. The classic stereotypical feminine principle. So these nakshatras have something to do with sexuality because women, of course, are like the focal point. So, but they're not. Again, it's not like the Mars thing is where this is the aggression. You need some aggression in sexuality too. You need some. You need to start. Otherwise, it doesn't get started. You need some catalyst to get it moving. So it's not really just that a Mridu nakshatra by itself is sexy, but a Mridu nakshatra, for example, Mrigashirsha is beautiful. It's like the face of a deer. It's like the eyes of a deer. It's so beautiful. It's so attractive. Another Anuradha. It's a beautiful nakshatra. Another Mridu nakshatra is Chitra. And there's another one too. It's escaping my attention right now.
Right?
Which one?
Revati?
Yes, thank you. Revati, beautiful. Right? These are really beautiful nakshatras. So they're like Venus. Like the same way that we think about Venus, we should think about the Mridu nakshatras. And then but surprisingly, where the sexual stuff comes in is more like Mars type of stuff with nakshatras, the strong nakshatras, the Ugra nakshatras. Purvas, all the Purva Palgunis will actually get something started. They come first. That's why they're called Purva. Purva Palguni especially, because it's the getting started with the red girl, Purva Palguni. Right. Or any of the Purvas or any Ugra nakshatra has that maleness to it. You see, you have to get the combination between male and female to get sex. At least in theory, right? that's the sexual, that's in theory, that's the sexuality, that element of masculinity and femininity has to combine. So you got to get some kind of principle of Mars and some kind of principle of Venus together. So with the nakshatras, that means some kind of principle of Ugra nakshatra with some sort of principle of Amridu nakshatra. Then there's also enduring nakshatras, dhruvas, and those are good if you want anything to last. Which is also important because what the other thing about should be said about sexuality is it's like a unification between two parties. So because that's what love is. Love is trying to unify things. So it takes its form in sexuality where it's actually like a literal unification of two parties. So that's not an easy thing to do. Like that's exhausting to unify. If you just, you know, to bring something into your life, to bring something into yourself, it's exhausting potentially. So it's not something that you really want to do with 7,000 people. You know, everybody, maybe men have dreams of like they wish they had 7,000 women, but it's actually exhausting. Maybe 3. No, I'm just, you know, some variety is good, but you don't want to have like unlimited, right? It's not what the nature of the thing is for. The nature of the thing is intimate, right? So how can it be done with like a public audience? You can't just have sex with the world. You have sex with a partner who comes into your private space. So enduring nakshatras are also very conducive to sexuality because it lets something last. Like once you form a bond with somebody, where you decide like you're gonna merge with this person, then it's difficult. It's easy to stay merged with that person, but it's difficult to break it and tell that person to go away and then find somebody else and bring that other person in. That kind of approach to sexuality, like having a lot of lovers, is exhausting and it's detrimental. It doesn't produce happiness in the same way that can be produced by, I mean, I myself am married, one wife, no problem. I don't need 3 lovers or anything like that. But it's not like I'm a champion of monogamy either. Actually, I think monogamy is a Christian invention and a modern thing like that. You know, Vedic culture definitely wasn't monoamorous. Not even from the female side was it only dedicated to one male. Even if there's the story of a certain point in time when females were then barred from having more than one husband, which indicates that previous to that, it was quite normal for a female to have as many husbands as she wanted, to have as many fathers for children as she wanted. It was because in previous eras, people were naturally good. In the previous yugas, the previous epochs, God bless you, they were they were good by nature. So you wouldn't have exploitation, and you would have natural love for children, and men and father and mother would naturally take care of the child. They didn't need to have laws about marriage and who's responsible for this child, etc. It just all happened naturally. So it would be very feasible that you could have children with many different people.
And there was cooperation between
There was
them?
cooperation because people had good hearts. But as that diminishes, as Treta Yuga, after Satya Yuga is over and Treta Yuga comes in, then women can't be allowed to have many different husbands because the husbands, something along the lines of, the husbands won't take care. The husbands don't have, men don't have as much of an attachment to children because they don't actually make the child or feed the child directly from their body. So you got to limit the amount of men that are allowed to interact with one woman. And then later they're going to limit, as Kali Yuga comes in, then you get a limitation on, it comes to monogamy, which isn't even biologically reasonable. So anyway, I'm not like trying to be the champion of the Christian version of marriage or something, but what I am saying is like having like too many lovers is actually counterproductive. You know, there should be a few people that you could be at most, you know, at least if you have one person and you stay, you stay well united. That's a better sexual experience than going through many, many different partners. So the nakshatras that are good for enduring, for keeping things staying, or you could extend it to the signs that are fixed, but it's more explicit with the nakshatras. Those are also good for sexuality in a way that we might not expect. For example, Rohini is an enduring nakshatra. It's not a mridu nakshatra. It's creative and sexy and it's all that stuff, but in an enduring way. It maintains the partnership between the two partners, which is actually ideal.
And Barney is also enduring too, right?
Yeah, Barney but must be Ugra.
Ugra. And the relationship of that and God Yama, who's related to death, how is that related to sexuality? That was one of the things that always confused me.
How is the god death related to sexuality? Well, how is Barney related to sexuality? Because it's symbolized by a vagina, right?
Yes.
So it's related more to work than to sexuality, labor, birthing.
Okay.
It's not really about the fun of creating a child, but it's the hard work of after the fun is over. This is another reason why women aren't as sexual, don't have as much sexual hunger as men do, because they have to deal with 9 months of consequence, quite likely. So like after the fun's over, then what you got a lot of work. And then after the 9 months is over, you got even more work for like 18 years. So Barney is bringing out that aspect of sexuality, is really that, hey, behind every single pleasure is tons and tons and tons of hard work. So Barney is saying, work hard. That word, that's why it's called Barney. Barney means it's the one who carries a lot of weight. So you see, moms carry a tremendous amount of weight. Women carry a tremendous amount of weight by the burden of bearing a child. They carry the child. So Barney is really about responsibilities and a lot of hard work. It's not a sexy nakshatra.
Thank you.
Of course, like any nakshatra, anything can be sexy in the right combination and things like that. Okay. You wanna go on?
Yes.
All right.
So I just wanted to maybe quickly, if we can flip it and talk about what is least sexual in terms of how sign, planet, or nakshatra, even if it's briefly. Because I'm thinking, for example, Saturn in the 12th house, I imagine that would kind of hinder things, or maybe in the 8th house, maybe not. So,
yeah. Yeah. I think the least sexual planet has to be Ketu.
Ketu.
Okay. Yeah. Though if you put Ketu in sexual positions, it's funny. If you put it in a sexual house, right? If you put Ketu in a sexual house, then of course it's going to impact sexuality. But Ketu by itself is asexual. Ketu has no interest in anything with any physical trigger at all. Okay, sex is not really physical, but it requires the physical triggers. So Ketu would be more interested in getting that ananda that you get access to in an orgasm without having to deal with physical triggers. Ketu is a spiritual planet. However, if you put Ketu, for example, in the 8th house, then the typical interpretation of that is their approach to sexuality is not so physical. Their approach to it is psychological. And they might be more shy than usual about it. Ketu is a very asexual planet. Then also again, this comes down to the genders of the planets: Ketu, Saturn, and Mercury. Ketu is asexual, so that's the most non-sexual planet. Saturn is like an old person. So old people aren't really sexy. And a lot of times they can't even have sex. The women are dry and the men are soft. So you can't, it doesn't work. Right? And Saturn is the dry planet. Right? Saturn is a planet of dryness, and it's a woman. Saturn is a female who's actually crossed towards being a male. And Mercury is a male who crosses to being a female. So Saturn is particularly not good for fertility. Saturn, however, can give you perversions or abnormalities. So if you put Saturn, because that's the nature of Saturn, is abnormal. He's got a limp, he's unusual. He's got a handicap. So if you put Saturn in contact with sexual indicators, then you can get an unusual sexual preference or an unusual sexual outlook or an unusual approach to sexuality. You might get a person that loves anybody, likes dirty things, likes ugly people. Might get a person that likes weird stuff, kinky stuff, strange stuff, because it's unusual stuff, because Saturn is unusual. Maybe a little bit like, what do they call that? Bondage, sadomasochism. If you throw Mars in there with that, add Mars into the thing, get a little bit more violent. Then you get Mercury. Mercury is also transgender. So Mercury's too young. Saturn's too old for sex. Mercury's too young for sex. Mercury's prepubescent. So genders haven't really become much of an issue. And Mercury is more about friendship and fun. Likes to laugh, likes to talk, likes to converse, likes to play games. Doesn't really even get sexual references. Sexual references just go over its head.
How come Mercury is known as the playboy and flirtatious? It's not.
No, it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be.
But it's fun. Okay. The other thing too is sometimes just people aren't used to having a clinical mind with astrology, because it hasn't really been treated clinically for many centuries in the West, astrology, right? You have to have a clinical mind, or at least I approach it with a clinical mind. And Mercury doesn't represent sexuality, but put Mercury, like I said, Ketu doesn't represent sexuality. It's unsexual, but put it in a sexual position and it has some impact on sexuality, right? Same thing with Saturn. Saturn is asexual. It's too old. Put it in a sexual house or a sign or something, and it says something about your sexuality. Same thing with Mercury. Mercury itself doesn't represent sexuality, but if you put it in this combination with sexual indicators, it says something. It says flirtatious is fun, just like flirty fun. Doesn't really go for the actual, won't really go for the actual sex, but is really flirty and likes the whole thing. And it sees it all as a game and has fun and plays games with people in a sexual way. But Mercury by itself, just as a clinical symbol, is asexual because it's too young. The other thing with Mercury or Saturn or Ketu with sexual symbols can indicate, like I mentioned before, homosexual or bisexual or no gender normality. It can pull sexuality away from its gender norm, because these planets don't have a normal gender. They don't have a clearly defined gender. Okay. So Mercury is also youthful. And so Mercury with a sexual symbol could give a prolonged sexual viability. You know, like some people, their sexual viability ends at the age 40s. Some people's sexual viability ends at the age 70. So Mercury can play a factor there in keeping youthfulness in the sex drive. So those are the planets that I think are least sexual. Most of all Ketu, then Saturn, and then Mercury. But even an unsexual planet will have a sexual effect.
Okay. And I wanted to see, what if we have debilitated Mars or debilitated Venus?
Well, yeah. Debilitated Venus, because Venus represents love. So debilitated Venus means that there's a lot of simplicity in who you love. So one real likely thing is just accepting partners too easily, not being discriminating with your partners. The first person who comes along. The first person who's willing. It's like a debilitated Venus. But the nice thing about a debilitated Venus, because I think I talked about this recently, I did an interview with astrology called a channel called Exotic Astrology.
This
And
is
I was
the last interview you did, right?
yeah, we're talking about dignity. So you got to check your debilitation to see overall is this planet actually debilitated or not. If the debilitated Venus that actually has a good dignity would be more like a person that sees everybody as beautiful. You know, it still has a hint of being non-selective, non-discriminating, but it's not as damaging. Venus in connection with Saturn will do something similar. Venus in a Saturn sign is similar to a debilitated Venus in that respect, or Venus in conjunction with Saturn. They like people that are dirty or like, you know, they have a flaw. It doesn't look unbeautiful to the, you know, the person with Venus and Saturn likes people who have wrinkles or likes people who are not classically beautiful or likes ordinary people or likes ordinary things. What was the other one? Mars.
Mars, but in relation to sexuality and sex or that sensuality of Venus, does it kind of lose that or?
Well, like I said, yeah, okay. Venus is important for sexuality because the sense perception is important. So in that sense, yes. Another, yeah, that's the other thing too. You Venus, debilitated Venus, you don't expect them to have a very prolific love life, but it can be unusual. I mean, it can be different. What if you have Venus debilitated with the Raja Yoga or something? It gets very sophisticated. Every chart is actually quite different. Even every chart that has the debilitated Venus is actually quite different from each other. But here we're talking about the clinical effect of a debilitated Venus. And then a debilitated Mars?
Yes.
I don't usually ascribe sexuality to that to begin with.
Yeah, Cancer.
Because it's more about having emotions that are counterproductive. Because it's going to Mars debilitates in Cancer. So it's really about emotions that get in the way of the bravery, courageousness and assertiveness asserted at the wrong times, impulsive courageousness and assertiveness, anger. It's not good for sexuality, of course, because it's not good for relating with women to have those kind of nature, to have those traits. But I don't see it.
Ask this question later in terms of sometimes acts of violence are confused for sexual acts, right? So if we have, let's say, a debilitated Mars and sexual assault or things of that nature, could they ever be connected in those terms? Yes.
Yeah, Mars. The sexual assault is basically where the masculine principle is out of control. Because the male has to initiate the exchange. That's the nature of what it means to be masculine. I'm sure maybe there's females who have a lot of masculinity, and that's beautiful and sexy. I'm not calling you a man, you know, I'm not speaking about it derogatorily. But there's females that have really good Mars, and they're very outgoing and assertive in their sexual relationships. Then that's super attractive. Those are actually, if you analyze sexy women, they always have a ton of masculine. Like they'll have some Purva Palguni, they'll have a lot of Ugra Nakshatra, like Sun in Purva Palguni. Or they'll have Mars, a lot of Mars, Aries, Mars and Scorpio or something. They have a lot of Mars and a lot of Sun, and that gives them that masculine energy. But here they are, they're the female. So they're the object of beauty, and they're able to initiate. They're able to initiate, so they got it all in one package. It's like the ideal. So they become super sexy. But typically, the male has to initiate. The male leads, and when you dance, the male takes that little first step, and then the female steps in that same spot. So it's like kind of like the way that courtship goes. So if you just blow that out of proportion, then you get sexual assault. And it's confusing. It's actually not, it's really not easy to be a man. It's not easy to be anybody. But there's difficult things about being a man too that you wouldn't really know until you're a man. Or if you're very empathetic, if you put yourself in the male's point of view. Like it's really hard to figure out what's crossing the line.
Mhm.
But sexual assault is like, obviously you've crossed the line and you realize you crossed the line and you just don't stop. So that's where it's just out of control. It's masculinity which thinks, I'm going to initiate this event. I'm the enjoyer. I'm the enjoyer. I'm the seer. I'm the doer. I'm going to initiate it. And this person is unwilling, but who cares? I'm in control. So it's just masculinity has gone overboard. There's no feminine counterbalance at all. And then it results in something like sexual assault. So you definitely have to see Mars, because Mars is the symbol for masculinity. You're going to see Mars, maybe a debilitated Mars in the 8th house. But how bad is the sexual assault? Is it actually like a crime, or is it just like you make women uncomfortable and then they run away from you? You know, that depends on how prominent is this Mars. How wild is it? Is it conjoined with Rahu or Ketu? How malefic is it? Is it getting an effect from Saturn? It's definitely not. I don't want to say, hey, everybody who has Mars and Cancer in the 8th house is a rapist. That would be an awful thing to say. But you know, this is one of the factors that may go into it. A debilitated Mars in the 8th house, maybe, but you have to have additional things. This Mars has to be really prominent. It has to be influenced by the nodes and Saturn. There has to be some other indications in the chart that put the whole thing into a sexual context. You know, the whole trick of reading a chart is your context. So the chart should start out with a sexual context and then have a fatal flaw in it, and then you can get a sexual predator. We should maybe do an analysis of the charts of known rapists and see what they have.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, because it would be absurd to just look at a chart and Mars in the 8th house and just assume that this person is going to violate someone sexually. So yeah.
Definitely absurd, especially just Mars in the 8th house. Mars in the 8th house just means, wow, strong sex drive, assertive sexuality.
Yes.
Maybe if it has great dignity, then this is the guy that women love. He does everything a man is supposed to do. It's easy to be a woman with this guy, right? Mars in the 8th house and good dignity. Sexually speaking, he's a good male.
Do you mind if we do that one of these days?
No, that would be great. Let's do that.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Should I move on to the next one?
Sure.
You kind of touched on this one about the elements and how they affect sexuality and sex. So air sign, fire, earth, and water, just in terms of how they affect sexual behavior and the dynamics.
Yeah, this is really funny. I was just reading some classical books, and how much some of their sexual yogas are connected with water signs is funny. Like the other thing that's just fun about older cultures is they don't have the PC thing and the taboo thing as much as we do. So they'll just say some ridiculous things. And astrologers are also good for saying ridiculous things because they're talking clinically. So they'll say something that's very stereotypical or extreme because you're supposed to realize that they're talking about this in isolation. You know, they'll say like eighth, if in a woman's chart, the 8th Lord is in a water sign, then she's always wet. And so this is a sexual connotation, right? So it's amazing. You hear this you think this old Vedic culture is not sexual or something, but here's like this really wild kind of thing to say. Now, does it mean that if the 8th sign is in 8th Lord is in a water sign, then the woman is always ready for sex? Well, it does by itself. It's an extreme statement to make, but because everything by itself is by nature extreme. It only becomes non-extreme when you blend it with everything else in the chart. So whether this is about sexuality or anything else, that's the way astrology works. And it's hard for people to grasp that.
Yes.
So what was the question? I think I'm forgetting it.
In terms of the elements, how they affect sexual behavior dynamics.
Well, okay, fire is going to be aggressive and clear. So your typical fire guy, a fire person would walk up to you and say, wow, what's your name? You know, that guy, right? He's confident, and his mind is also clear. He's not thinking, well, which girl here is the most attractive. He finds the most one that he likes, and zoom, and then it's just clear and confident. Fire is that nature of being confident, strong male. If a woman is in a fire sign, she'll do the same thing, and it'll be even more fascinating, because who's this Wonder Woman? Like, where does she get these qualities from? Air sign and sexuality is very flirty. Like you said, why is Mercury a playboy? Because Gemini, it's Gemini, so people can think of it like that. It's flirty. It's not really actually going. It's not really actually interested in getting in bed. It's more interested in talking about it, joking about it, alluding to it, flirting about it, making you think that it's going to happen. Or then if it does wind up actually in the bed, it wouldn't be straight to the point. There'd still be conversation going on, and there'd still be like tickling or something going on. It wouldn't just go straight to the point. Air is more fun, not so serious. Earth sign, this is the person that's not really going to a singles bar or anything like that. They're not interested. They Earth sign is stable. So the Earth sign sexuality is, I'm beautiful, I'm worth it, you come to me. Okay. And you get online. Like, this is the ideal Earth sign sexuality, is you get online and I'll take your resume. They'll evaluate their partners and they'll say, who's a fitting mate? Because their Earth is also practical. And long term, they don't want to have 15 different partners. They want to get it right.
It's more relationship oriented then.
They're going to have a long-term sexual relationship with the person. They're not going out. They're not exhibiting hunger for sexuality. They're exhibiting the attractiveness of sexuality, and they're pulling mates towards them. Fire is hungry. It's the opposite. It's going out and looking. And it's going out and starting the things and getting the ball rolling. Earth is like, hey, I'm here. This is the treasure that you're looking for. Come and apply, and I'll evaluate you. Water, probably the nicest. Because Earth is like a little bit hard, right? Earth is a little tough, like very practical and not so forgiving. Knows that it's beautiful, but not so forgiving with people. Water is so gentle. Water is beautiful, gentle. Water is the female element for sexuality, right? You need liquidity, so water is like more sexy, but water is private. So that's why the feminine nature, even when it becomes sexy, it doesn't become a man. Feminine nature becomes super attractive. Like Earth is attracting people too, and water people is just like pulling people in like a whirlpool. And then, but then being very gentle with them, and it also has an emotional nature. It's going to be loving. Water is more, it's also going to be relationship oriented, but it's going to be like loving. It's going to get its emotions really involved in sexuality, deep. So it's not going to be easy it's not easy to have a one night stand with the earth element or the fire element. Or with the earth element or the water element. But one night stand is easy with the air element, totally easy. And easy with, well, not so easy with the air element because it's hard to get it actually into the bedroom. Right. But easy with the air element because that's what the fire element wants. See somebody new, June. So water is not really also like a one night stand thing, but it's so beautiful, it's so attractive, and it's deep. Once you get into it with the water element, you don't want to get out because you get deep and you get surrounded with this soft calming thing, and then you're ensnared. Right. Just the water element is like a very seductive sexuality.
I do want to ask one question here. We didn't talk about Jupiter, and Jupiter has both fire sign and water sign, yet it's not supposed to be that sexual, right?
But interestingly represents children and is the chakra that's right by it's the genital chakra. It's the reproductive chakra. Saturn is a little lower, but it's too low. It's the excretive chakra. Jupiter is the reproductive chakra in your body, so it's reproductive energy, childbirthing, growth, expansion. So it has to do with reproduction. People don't really put Jupiter into the sexual picture because he's like a priest, right? Jupiter's like a priest. Jupiter is like your parents. But if you think about your parents, they must have been having sex, otherwise you weren't here. But nobody thinks of their parents as having sex. It doesn't taste bad. It tastes bad. So Jupiter's like that. He's not a sexy planet, but he's essential for childbirth and child rearing, and the growth of the child, taking care of a child, raising a child. That's Jupiter.
So ethical sex.
If he has anything to do with sex, then it would be like moral sex, ethical sex because you want children, reproductive sex. But really what Jupiter is really about is raising the child, bearing the child, raising the child. So it's not really about sex, but it's about what happens afterwards. But Jupiter will have impact on the reproductive drive, on the libido, just like the 8th house does. Because by virtue of the fact that it controls the ability to expand, so it controls your ability to create new life. So it's another factor, a secondary factor. A prominent Jupiter can indicate fertility, and fertility indicates libido. What else? Oh, we're done.
Is it done?
Yeah.
Are we out of time?
Well, we went through an hour.
Yeah, it is we are out of time. Okay. So
You have more questions?
Oh, I had so many more questions.
So many more questions.
Okay.
Maybe we'll do a part 2.
Okay, yeah, I'd love that if that works, yes.
All right, thank you for asking these questions. It's like, these are the questions that everybody wants to know about, but it's kind of embarrassing to ask about and talk about.
And there was a couple of times I tried to keep a straight face.
Sorry if I told any off-color jokes. Also, people, don't get me wrong. Think whenever you hear my comments, put it into the context of who I actually am. Like, I'm not like a sex hound or anything. I'm just a married man, spiritual inclinations and everything. It's just that I have a very spiritual concept of what sexuality is because I'm a devotee of Krishna. And Krishna is a very sexual God on a spiritual level. So I kind of know a lot about it. Yes. But I have a debilitated Venus. So I'm not like Don Juan or anything. And yeah, I'm not trying to be the love guru or the sex guru or anything, or the sex astrologer. But I love the topic. Everybody loves the topic.
Yes, and it's such a thing in our culture today, sexuality in general. So to actually talk about it and understand in the context of astrology, I feel is important. It was for me too.
Yeah, but I have an important disagreement there, actually.
Yes.
There's some kind of an illusion that sex is a big thing in our culture today, but it wasn't yesterday. That's the biggest illusion that anybody has ever told themselves. Sex is always like, what do you got to do? You got to eat, you have to sleep, you have to have sex, and you have to protect yourself. Those are the 4 things that you have to do in this world to survive. Otherwise, you're not going to survive. If you don't have sex, your family's going to die. So these are the 4 things that are essential to life, every kind of life, not only human beings. Ants and cockroaches are also doing these 4 things. Every culture, not even human culture, for all history, is going to be obsessed with food. Put a picture of your food on Facebook and you'll get 100 likes. Put a picture of your boobs on Facebook, you'll get 100 likes. Because sex and food, right? And then put a picture of your house, you'll get 100 likes. Because people want to sleep somewhere. So these are the 3 things that everybody can relate to. Or put a picture of fighting. You'll get 100 likes, mostly from men, right? So you get all those 4 things always attract people's attention. Fights, sex, places to sleep, and stuff to eat.
Necessities for life.
Because those are the necessities of life. They've always been the necessities of life. And people are misinformed to think that our culture is going towards better sexuality. It's just that we went through a dark age period where we had where our way of thinking was dominated by a world-hating worldview, by the apocalyptic worldview that this world is bad, it has to be destroyed, and then there'll be a heaven. So a dualistic, apocalyptic worldview took over the global consciousness through Christianity and Islam, spreading the Judaic ideas. So we're coming out of that. Yeah, it looks like we're progressing in our attitudes towards sexuality and everything. But what was the world like before that? That's really interesting to think about. It was actually way better about family and sexuality and love and just basic happiness. It was way better than what we have today before the advent of the Judeo-Christian Abrahamic regime, you know, before that. So sexuality is not really where we're going. We're not really headed in the direction to really understand it. We're headed in a Rahu direction with sexuality. Just like this wild, overly extroverted, blunt sexuality. Go back and look at ancient Greek, ancient Indian, Vedic, whatever ancient cultures that you have records of. Go and look at their attitudes towards sexuality. They don't have problems with homosexuality. They don't have problems with multiple partners. They don't see sex as something terrible that you have to like shun and only do it under certain circumstances. They have a totally beautiful outlook on sex, and also they're not sex fiends. You know, they're totally into philosophy and spirituality way more than we are, religion, everything, way more than we are. So Christianity actually put this weird split into this life where there's like this world and hedonism and sexuality, and it's totally opposite than God and religion and everything like that. And that's really screwing us up towards sexuality and towards religion and God. So now we're moving out of that, and that's lovely, but we're not moving back towards the roots that it destroyed. We're just moving into like Libra. We're just like moving into a new direction. So it doesn't look like it'll be then, therefore, thousands of years again until we get it right again. But some of us can look back to the ancient cultures and make little pockets of good understanding of family, good understanding of sex, good understanding of love.
Even the artifacts from India, the statues, it is sexual, but it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's so sexually beautiful. You got the oldest records of pornography are in India on the temples. Yes. That boggles a Christian mind. That boggles the modern mind, doesn't it? Yes. Because no matter what religion we are, all of our minds are basically Christian, because the world has been dominated by morals, laws, societies that have been born out of the Judeo-Christian, Moses-based morality. So, like it or not, we all have a Christian seed in the bottom of our. Now, also, people are going to think that I hate Christianity. I don't hate Christianity. Like, there's beautiful things in Christianity too, but I do hate the dualistic, apocalyptic, this world is bad worldview. So if you could get that out of your Christianity, then I love it.
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome, Parisa. Thank you. All right, great. I look forward to putting this on Facebook, on YouTube, and see what people think about this.
Me too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Bye.